გავუწყოთ. დიდი მადლობა ყველას მოგზაურებისთვის. მე ვარ შოთა ბახავა, იოვის ფონდის სამხრეთ კავკასიის ოფისის პროგრამის კოორდინატორი. პირველ რიგში მინდა გამოვხატო მადლიერება და სიხარული იმ საშუალებისთვის, რომელიც თქვენ მოგვეცით გამოგონისწიების ზუსტად ამ სივრცეში ჩატარებისთვის. ჩვენი ფონდი არის ერთ-ერთი წამყვანი ევროპის მწვანე ფონდი და გვინდა რომ იმ მნიშვნელოვან მოძრაობას, რომელიც დაიწყო ამ კედლებში დაუჭიროთ მხარი და ამისთვის დღეს მოგიყვანეთ ძალიან საინტერესო ადამიანი, ბუდაპეშტის კოვინუსის უნივერსიტეტის პროფესორი, რომელზეც გიორგი მაისურაძე ასევე ის ერთი ორ სიტყვას მოიცა. გიორგი, ოღონდ მე დავამატებდი კიდე ერთ რაღაცას, უბრალოდ ხაზი მინდა გავუსვა დღევანდელი თემის მნიშვნელობას და იმას, რომ ეს არის თემა, რომელზეც დიდად არ ლაპარაკობენ ქართულ სივრცეში, რაც თეორიული ბაზა პოსტკოლონიურ პრობლემებზე საუბრის ასე თუ ისე ნელ-ნელა მე მგონი მაინც წამოიწევა წინ საქართველოში, მაგრამ უშუალოდ თანამედროვე გამოწვევებზე მე ყოველთვის არ მომისმენია რომ იმას ესაუბრა და ძალიან მიხარია რომ ზუსტად ასეთ პრობლემაზე ვისაუბრებთ დღეს და ასე მოგწოდეთ რომ დისკუსიაში ჩაერთოთ პირდაპირ მოხსენების შემდეგ ლექციის სათაურზე როდესაც ფიქრობდით იქ გამოჩნდა ესეთი ტერმინი ტოლვილთა კრიზისი. თარგმანი მუშაობს უკვე მაშინ ინგლისურად გადავალ ატემაც მინდა რომ გაიგოს. So the term the refugee crisis as it is used in Europe currently has become a point of contention within the current European discourse. And a lot of people from the progressive wing have essentially criticized it for its implications, right? It's a refugee crisis for whom, right? It's a crisis, if we say that it is a refugee crisis, we assume a kind of Europe with its own walls that the crisis threatens. And so when thinking about the title of today's talk, I was thinking, well, should I use, refugee crisis, should I not? How should we represent it? And then I thought, you know what? It is a refugee crisis. And it is okay to call it a refugee crisis because it is a refugee crisis for the refugees, right? So it depends on the shift in your perspective, whether you call it a refugee crisis from the perspective of the receiving countries, or whether you call it a refugee crisis from the perspective of the refugees. So I would want us to think further maybe about these shifts in perspective, discursive shifts in perspective, and how they change our own attitudes towards this, one of the most important events, if it can be termed such, for Europe and European identity. Before I give the floor to Attila, I wanted to give an opportunity to our second sponsor, Social-Cultural Clarity Centris Institute Auditorium Universitätიდან, რომელსაც დღეს წარმოადგენს გიორგი მაისურაძე.
მოგესალმებით ილიას უნივერსიტეტის სოციალური და კულტურის კვლევების ინსტიტუტის სახელით, რომელიც თანაორგანიზატორია შეხვედრის მანაგებელთან ჩვენ გასაკუთრებული ურთიერთობა მოკავშირეებს შარშან ოქტომბრის ბოლოს ჩავატარეთ პირველი კონფერენცია სახელმწიფოებზე და ზოგადადაც დამოუკიდებელადაც ვცდილობთ ის რასაც პოსტკოლონიალური თემატიკა ქვია, მიგრაციის თემები და ასე შემდეგ, აგრეთვე ტოლვილთა პრობლემატიკა, რომელიც ძალიან აქტუალურია დღეს, მაგრამ განსაკუთრებით ხაზს გავუსვამდი მე პოსტკოლონიალიზმს და პოსტკოლონიურ კვლევათა პერსპექტივას, რომელიც პარადოქსულია, მაგრამ საქართველოში ფაქტობრივად არ არსებობს. პარადოქსულია იმდენად, რამდენადაც ჩვენ შეიძლება უშუალოდ კოლონია არ ყოფილიყავით, მაგრამ ის პარადიგმა, რომელსაც ემყარება პოსტკოლონიალური თეორიები, შეიძლება ითქვას, რომ პირდაპირ გვეხება ჩვენს და პირდაპირ მორგებადია საქართველოს მოდელზე და მე ვიტყოდი, რომ ეს არის ერთგვარი პერსპექტივაც კი, რომ გავიგოთ ჩვენი თავი და გავიგოთ ჩვენი ისტორიული იქნება თუ კულტურული, პოლიტიკური მდებარეობა და შესაბამისი პერსპექტივები და სწორედ ბატონ ატილა მელექის დახმარებით გსურს, რომ დასაწყისისთვის ჩვენს ინსტიტუტში შემოვიგანოთ ეს თემატიკა, ავამუშავოთ ეს თემატიკა. მე პირადად მიუხედავად ჩემი სუბიექტური განწყობისა მის მიმართ ვიტყოდი, რომ მისი ლექციები წელს ზამთარში ყავდა ბატონი ატილა მელექი მოძრაული, მას 3 ლექცია წაიკითხა ერთი ციკლი ჩვენთან ილიას უნივერსიტეტში და ჩამომართვეთ ამას ზედმეტ უტრირებაში, მაგრამ ეს იყო ერთ-ერთი ყველაზე შთამბეჭდავი, რაც კი მე ცხოვრებაში მომსმენია. მოსმენი მყავს ძალიან ბევრი ცნობილი სახელი და კლასიკოსი, პირად აუდიტორიაში ვდგომით და მე ვიტყოდი, რომ აი იმ შთამბეჭდილებამ და აქტუალობამაც და მოწოდების მანერამაც, რომელიც მივიღეთ ბატონი ატილა მელექისაგან, ჩემთვის პირადად ჩემ გამოცდილებაში ყველა შთაბეჭდილება გადაფარა. ამიტომ მიხარია, რომ ის აქ არის და ახლა უკვე პირდაპირ მას გადავცეთ სიტყვა.
It's a great pleasure to be here, and to be honest, the intellectual life in Tbilisi this is not the first time I'm here, but it is really going up and it's getting very interesting, so it's a privilege to be here, and I'm really delighted that we have a chance to discuss something very important today. Because I think, and then I'm going to argue for you, we are seeing rather dramatic historical change going on now. Such transformative change, which we haven't seen for at least many decades, and it's going to shape the life of the new generations. I'm pretty sure about that. And I will argue that this refugee crisis, which is a real crisis for all those people who have been forced to go to a long journey, beside that, it has been a cataclysm. That is to say, it shifted the tracks of historical change somehow, and then it's a new thing is emerging. Now, the first thing, I've learned something in science, namely that we have to be clear about your personal reflections. So good science starts where you actually, and this is what we can learn in post-colonial studies, when actually you clarify your position in the whole story. And for this, I put together a little bit of kind of an intellectual history of mine for the last 1.5 years, when all of a sudden I had to see something dramatic emerging. And this year has been a formative year for myself as well, because the cycle was the following. I always started laughing, and then after a while this laugh was frozen onto my face. The first time I laughed was when there was this demonstration you can see after the Charlie Hebdo attack. I was not smiling because of the attack, don't misunderstand me. The thing was the following, that the Hungarian Prime Minister attended this event. He's in the second row. And then the day after, in Paris, he gave a press conference to to Hungarian press. And then he announced that the refugee inflow is a major source of terrorism. We have to fight because that's a global European problem. And then we looked at it, we intellectuals sitting in Budapest, and we laughed. And sorry, the Prime Minister didn't have the right pills, or he left them, or something happened. And we kept on this, in this, but we could see that the whole story is not over. A couple of months later, the Prime Minister announced something which he calls national consultation. For him, this is democracy. For other people, it's propaganda. Basically, on government money, he put out billboards, and he sent out questionnaires to all possible voters, asking questions which I don't show and analyze. But do you think terrorism is a big problem? Very much, yes. And then you could say no. So it was a very manipulative questionnaire. There are some good survey sociologists sitting here. They would laugh at such a survey because that's really giving the food exactly to the mouth of the respondents. And then, of course, who answers to a government questionnaire, right? Which is, what is the, the response rate and how is it systematic? This is what I call democracy. I call it basically spreading the message, making propaganda. And then we sat together, and one Saturday evening, I called one of my colleagues and said, we should protest. I'm sorry, we can't do it like this. Because these questions are manipulative, the whole story is smelly. So I myself collected all migration researchers in the country, almost all of them signed it, and we told, and I sent it to the Prime Minister, no reply, don't worry, saying that this kind of billboard campaign and this kind of questionnaire is leading to hatred, and this is most problematic, so finish it. Of course, nothing happened, right? That I didn't expect to have a reply from him. He's not that type, right? He likes his own national consultation, not when the the clients talk back, right? That's not something. And then you can see these very nice billboards, which are rather known in the whole world now. They say that in beautiful Hungarian, informally addressing refugees coming into the country, informally, because Hungarian is a polite language. So it has, formal and informal. And informally addressing them in Hungarian, in case you come to Hungary, don't take away all the jobs of the Hungarians, right? And of course we laughed. I mean, this is hilarious. Actually, not only us, but some people made counter billboards, which are put out, hilarious, check it on the internet. This is really a good exercise. And then you can see, like this, there's one counter thing, which of laughter. Come to Hungary by all means. We are already working in London. Please excuse our empty country. We have gone to England, right? Okay. So once again, we laughed. And then the whole story nonetheless did not end, and actually in the end the questionnaire was made, the billboards were made, and then we could see the public opinion figures, and 80% of the Hungarian population approved. And then we thought, okay, should we smile or not? And things were really getting to the stomach. The next thing which happened, and once again, which needs reflection on my side as well, that these refugees came to the railway station of Budapest, which became a global media scene for 2 months. When these refugees are just fired up because the Hungarian government decided not to allow these people to go on to our journey. At the same time, and I will show it, they started talking about the fence and building a fence. Once again, in the beginning we laughed, New Berlin Wall is coming, how funny. And then we could see all these things emerging. To make it even more personal, let me share two stories. I start with this family. This is not the picture of the family I'm talking about, because I didn't make a photo of that. But with my partner, we were traveling in Serbia. And we were talking about, of course, these refugees. The refugees are at the Serbian border. In front of them, and we were going by car. All of a sudden, we were stopped by some refugees. And then we had a kind of a thing what to do, because it was a couple with 3 children. Beautiful couple, as this couple is, right? Beautiful people. And then we took them because the car was too small, so we had to do it twice. Of course, we were a little bit worried because of them and the whole story, because the police was all the time out, and because they wanted to move to another Serbian town, most probably to get into Hungary. And then we took them. They didn't speak English. We spoke English. They started speaking something in French. And then, of course, I remember, and I have to confess, I made a mistake, which is a very common mistake, but it's very important. That in the end, I could see that it was getting emotional and I wanted to say something good to them, so I said, Inshallah. And then this Syrian guy looked at me, Inshallah. Then I immediately realized as a sociologist that this did not mean too much to him. Nonetheless, my partner and then the woman started crying. I almost cried, because you could see this kind of a defenseless little family, right? Which was just moving. I'm not really thinking too often of the Bible, but honestly, I had the feeling that Mary was at the side of the road, because it was really so touching, so emotional. We somehow said goodbye to each other. I don't know what happened to them later, but this was, personally, in this kind of a political atmosphere, that they are all terrorists, billboards out, fence being built, and so on and so on. And then, on a human level, your inner instincts are telling something completely different. And then, that was the first time I had the feeling, repression. Very severe repression is going on. We are repressing not only the human feelings of these people, but in ourselves as well. And that was shocking. The next shocking thing was at the Eastern Railway Station. There was a formative night in Budapest. I wish you were there, and you could see it, because then you could understand it. This was a very hot night. I think it was September the 2nd. And then, in that, during that formative night, first of all, there was a Romanian-Hungarian football match, and the fascists were coming toward the refugees. The refugee men started standing up, right, showing that they are prepared to fight. So there was an immediate threat of fight. There was the Hungarian police fully in this Martian helmet, whatever, things. And then the tension was so high that I didn't dare to smoke a cigarette because it would have blown up, right? And then, all of a sudden, out of blue, 50 old public buses of Budapest appeared. That type of an old, these yellow ones, right? So can you imagine that
there are refugees and no buses are coming, but these buses are coming. And they just piled up 50 buses at 1 a.m. And then, at that time I was also in a white t-shirt because I had to give an interview to BBC Newsnight, which was hilarious. I don't talk about that. It was so funny because the reporter started talking about Mr. Cameron having moral dilemmas, and I started laughing. Mr. Cameron and then moral dilemmas, right? I think there are two different things. Okay, so then all of a sudden these people, Afghan, Syrian, Iraqi men came up to me. It's very patriarchal, so they communicate. They came up to me because I look very serious and asking me, no camp, no camp. That is to say, whether they would get on the bus or not. And then what? You know, and then the reason why this question was burning was because the day before, a train full of refugees was stopped by the Hungarian police 30 kilometers after Budapest, and then people were forced to get off the train, and there was actually a physical fight. Okay, then these people came up to me, and then I said, what to say? I mean, of course, I don't know whether these people are going to go that way or something else was happening. And then I went to the police in the full helmet, trying to talk to them, right? Hi! And then trying to ask them, excuse me, these people are going to be taken to the camp or not? And then they said, we don't know. And then I went to the bus drivers because I was very smart, you see. And as a sociologist, and I started a kind of a small talk with the driver. You're going to have a long way because, you know, the camp is 30 kilometers, the border is 200 kilometers, right? A little more than. And then there was this ordinary bus driver sitting, you know bus drivers, big belly, you know, kind of a t-shirt, and so on. He replied to me, oh no, the journey has been long for these people. I said, look, what he was saying. And then we continued with this man, and then I could see that I could trust him. So I openly asked him, Mister, tell me, these buses are going to the border or to the camp? And then he answered the following way. I literally quoted. I fully understand the worry of these people. Because what happened yesterday, this is what he said, was like in Auschwitz. They were telling them shower, but they ended up in the gas chamber. Why I am saying this? Not because I want to have kind of an emotional, easy thing. The only thing, what I wanted to tell, is that that's the emotional level in interaction with these refugees. Right? The bus driver, not a sociologist, not a liberal, Soros-funded, whatever, said that, but the bus driver. Which meant it was assurance for me that he's having the same feeling like me. So this repression is happening here, right? And then this had a dramatic impact on me, but at the same time, the story was going on. And then the story was going on, and you could see Hungary built those fences. In the beginning, once again, it's a beautiful story in terms of East-West hierarchy. The Austrian president was telling that the Hungarian government was Nazi. Right? You know, it's the same discourse in some ways. But then you can see that the Austrians have also built their fences. Right? And that's really something which is worrying. But the fight continued, and then I show a video. Some of you have seen this video. Allow me, but this is something very important for my talk, to look at this video and to see how a mayor at the Hungarian-Serbian border reacted to the whole story. We are doing field work on this village, so we understand a lot out of the whole thing, but let's have a look at it. I try. I try to make noise to it. Can we just... It's maximum, right? So, the key point here. This video is completely hilarious. What kind of idea they have, it's actually not much to reflect on. Basically, these people had an idea that they had to threaten these people. And then in case they threaten them with this kind of a pseudo-American action, whatever, then it's going to be okay. But we are sitting here doing serious analysis, which means that you have to see the context of this. Because taking out of the context, you laugh. But seeing the repression going on and seeing this video, this is frightening. Because something new is coming up, a kind of a new atmosphere is eating into our body. Because even if you laugh at this, it's coming. The Prime Minister is talking like this, the Mayor is talking like this, everyday people started talking like this. And then they were going on the whole thing. So, and then I just wanted to show further on that this kind of a thing was not just a Hungarian story. I already mentioned Austria. Austria last weekend almost elected a fascist president because of the refugee crisis. The margin was, I think, 2,000 votes or something like that. That was the margin in Austria, which in the beginning started talking about Hungary as being Nazi. Then Germany, which has been a stronghold in this kind of a refugee situation, once again we can critically analyze them as well, do not misunderstand me. Nonetheless, Germany is changing, and then you can see this alternative for Germany, which is emerging as an amazing party, and then you can see that what they want to get rid of, the refugees and the asylum case, should be over. At the same time, we also laughed at this person in the beginning. A year ago, I remember everybody laughed at him, that how could it be, and this guy could say such things in the United States, but this guy is going to be the candidate on behalf of the Republican Party. And I haven't said anything about the Democrats at the moment, but I'm just warning you that once again the same thing. We start laughing at something, but this laughter seems to be freezing to our face. So what is going on? These are the personal reflections, and now I would like to give a more thorough analysis of the situation, and then to go into some kind of a structural analysis, and then we start analyzing on various levels. The first thing, of course, is how to do structural analysis in this, and I'm going to speak about the global conflict itself. Then I'm going to speak about migration processes and migration policies a little bit, and then I will talk about a very important thing, European identity crisis, and then in the end I will come up with saying that we might be in the process of a passive revolution. So, let's start this, okay? The first thing, which is actually shocking in the public discourses, I don't know about Georgian press, I don't read it, I hope it's different, but I have a bet it is not. Everybody is talking about these refugees, as every day Hungarians put it, they will be always talking about these niggers. While at the same time, nobody is talking about the root cause of the conflict. Nobody is talking about the war, how it is going, whether there's any hope. Nobody is talking about the emerging situation. I just would like to make two small points, and then we can come back during the discussion. The key problem in the whole region is a dramatic fight for regional hegemony. The key debate is between two blocks. There's an Iran, Assad, Russia bloc, and then there is the Saudi Arabia, Turkey, US bloc. And they are fighting for regional hegemony. The whole chaos has been, of course, created by the war in Iraq, which was at that time applauded by many European states. Not all of them, but many of them, including Hungary itself. And then you can see, even if you look at this photo, that this idea was tragic. Second point, this is very important, I don't want to go into this, but when there is a dramatic talk about, religious differences, you have to be super cautious, because then you can see that in this fight, various claims are used, because politicians, what they need is that they need to mobilize, right? They have to sell certain things, and then this is the way how they find it. But this Islamization of the region is going on dramatically, very much against Syrian people or Iraqi people who don't want to be part of this. Nonetheless, it's going on, and it is taking new form. Very importantly, countries like Saudi Arabia are thoroughly Islamist war makers who cannot be really trusted. Nonetheless, all European and US leaders talk to them all the time. So once I was confronted in Hungarian public media, you migration experts, tell us what to do, and said, sorry, it's not my field, it's not migration issue in the beginning, it's a peace issue.
peace or war? And then you have to ask, who is on the side of war and who is on the side of peace? And this is very simple, and you can do it. Why am I saying this? Because out of this tragedy, we already have close to at least 10 million people completely uprooted. Almost 3 million people live in Turkey, out of which 400,000 get refugee camp. The others are living in barracks, they are living in ruined houses, they are doing child labor, they are working for $10 a week in order to survive. In Lebanon, in Turkey, no refugee status. This doesn't exist. Turkey has a refugee status only for Europeans. So I can go to Turkey and tell Erdogan, Mr. I'm a political refugee from Hungary. Can you please take me? That's the possibility. But the same thing is true in Lebanon. In Lebanon, 1.4 million refugees. This is a place which is, I think, 1/4 of Georgia. Right? This is what we are talking about. In Iran, 1 million. In Jordan, 700,000. These, and internally displaced in Syria, is close to 5–6 million actually are not living at home. Out of Syria, 22 million people, already 6 million have left. Now if anybody says that this is economic migration, I give back all my degrees. Because there's no such country which is producing that amount of out-migration for economic reasons. So whenever these people come, oh no, it's warming up the climate and this is why they are coming. I think the logic is a little bit simpler. Bombs in, refugees out. Of course, all refugee groups contain other people as well. In Afghanistan, some of the people are desperate because of the long-term war. The Soviet Union started it in 1980. It has been going all the time. Of course they give up. Of course these people do not have any prospect. But why nobody is talking about giving a tremendous amount of money for finishing the war, feeding these people, providing schools? Out of the refugees, well above 1 million children receive no education at all. Okay? Which means that it is possible that only radicals will go into these places and tell that you have to believe in God and that it's going to be okay. Is this the thing we want? I'm not absolutely sure, right? So this is the first thing about the discourse. Why is it, if you have to, negative result is something to reflect on. Why is it that we are not talking about this? Why is it that we are not talking about how to achieve immediate peace? And I'm a bit worried. To be honest, very worried. Because this means that most people on a high level have an expectation of an even bigger war. And then a lot of things become rather logical. Second thing. Europe. Now let's look at the data. And I collected some data for you because this is not going through very well. So there you can see that out of this amount of refugees, Europe has received maximum 1.3 million. Okay, Europe, which at the same time controls 1/4 of the total GDP of the Earth, has received 1.3 million refugees. And then mainly from the region. Okay.
Of course, there is another thing, Northern Africa. This is why I'm saying that Cameroon and the moral dilemmas, I'm happy to talk about that, because that's impossible. Okay. Estimated refugee stocks in Europe. Now this is something shocking. In case you look at UN data, United Nations data, then you can see that basically Europe has been on a high level of refugees since 1991. That is to say, Europe has been coping with large numbers up till now. So why are we shouting? I know it's an extra which is coming on, but there is infrastructure, there are legal provisions, so this means that this extra is coming on an existing system. Why Europe is talking about a refugee crisis and they are thinking only of themselves? This is something we have to reflect on. The next thing, this is also asylum applications in terms of flow. But I show you, this is also EU applications. This is how you can see the flow data, right? This is 2000 up to 2015, right? This is how it has been going up. Now here comes something very interesting. A month ago, the German authorities, which are not completely bad in statistics, right? Everybody who works on migration statistics, like myself, we know that German data is rather reliable, long-term, and they use their own methods to do it. And then what you can see here is something which is completely forgotten. Europe, and within Europe, Germany, in 1992, had almost exactly the same crisis. I'm not saying that there was not an outrage. We all know the burning down of Vietnamese non-refugees in Rostock in 92. But there was no such an overall hysteria. And very importantly, this refugee crisis was mainly produced by Eastern Europe. So, Romanian refugees, ex-Soviet refugees, very large numbers there. So, it should be also in the discourse, no? But it is not in the discourse, this is completely forgotten. But you can see that this is the 1992, right? The orange. And then the blue one is actually what happened in Germany. Even if I say that they could not process all the applications, even in that case, this is shockingly similar to the previous refugee crisis. These are the ways how refugees are actually going in. These are the main routes to Europe. And there you can see there was a Balkanic route, and there was another route. One thing I would like to mention, as opposed to all claims, most of the people who are moving in this direction are coming from the war zone. Okay? Because everybody says, oh, all of them are from Pakistan. First of all, Eastern Pakistan is not a peace place. But in case you look at the data, then you can show Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan are really the key things, and they are experiencing war. Okay, now this is what I wanted to show you for Hungary as well. Why we had the hysteria here. Yes, countries like Hungary receive a much bigger number of refugees, which is true. Nonetheless, once again I would like to draw the attention that in the early 1990s, late 1980s, we also had one, which meant that we just cannot say that it was completely unprecedented, right?
Also, very importantly, 99% of the refugees who actually came in left immediately the country. So they, it's a kind of a Guinness record in some ways. Most probably more than 300,000 people went through Hungary. Nobody wanted to stay. Probably they could see the video of the mayor. Hungary is a bad choice. And then that was kept in their mind. Okay, these are the asylum seekers of Hungary. Then you can see it's mainly, Kosovo, Afghanistan. These are the cases. I haven't spoken about Kosovo. It's another issue. We can come back to this. The other thing I wanted to show you is that what proportion of refugee status was given, and it was very small. You can see that this is the asylum applicants, the big one, and then all the other ones who received something of a legal status in Hungary, right? So once again, you can see this absolute cynicism of this political discourse, which was portraying a dramatic threat to the public, when actually this is what we are talking about. But once again, we are sociologists or social scientists, which means that we have to reflect on that. Why is this happening? Now, the next point in the structural analysis is something very important, and I really think that much is to be done. Sorry, I can't do it. Some people sitting here who have been listening to migration studies for 2 weeks, even 2 weeks is little. I give you some key points. Europe and global migration. Europe was an out-migrant region in the 1950s. Europe became an immigrant region overall during the 1970s. This is when it became positive. That was also the period when European economy started using large number of people. Large number of people from Northern Africa, Turkey, and immediate regions, which is something you have to keep in mind, because this is one of the reasons why Germany is speaking differently. And then this is what these people also know, because they have some kind of a previous migrants already working there. Meaning, these people are following diasporas in a lot of ways. Now the next point, that in this, America, which is maintaining this pro-migrant discourse, has always been living on migrants. So please, do not think about ideologies just when you are thinking about this, but look at the structural processes themselves. Now I show you something complicated. Sorry, this is a nice graph, I like it, but I would like to just make one point. And the point is the following. This is Southeastern Europe, Eastern Europe is within the circle, right? And then you can see that they send migrants. They mainly send migrants to Germany, Northwestern Europe, and the US. Okay, that's not a big news, right? The big news is the following, that in case you look at whether these people are, whether this region is able to receive migrants outside the region, then you can see no. Basically, this region has become a major out-migrant region, meaning that Europe is not homogeneous. Europe is completely divided in terms of migration experience. I always laugh when they say European migration policy is about immigration. This is nonsense. European migration is about out-migration and immigration at the same time. And then this region of Eastern Europe, including Georgia, is emptying itself in the new political economy of these economies. This is what Georgia is joining now, very nicely. What do I want to show here in this graph? It's
It's very simple. There are, let's say, Central Europe, Southeastern Europe, in the 1950s was very close to each other in terms of well-being. You can see the graph opening up. This region is really becoming divided. East European countries are more or less at the global average, while Germany and many of Austria are having 2-3 times the global average. Now, and then there is a new political economy going on here. And the new political economy is that this European economy is living on these migrants. And it is a dramatic transfer of money towards the West. Because, first of all, this region is a major source or major territory for capital investment. So, Hungarian workers can satisfy German capital in Hungary. At the same time, Hungarian workers go to Germany to work for German capital over there. Why I'm saying this? Because there's a dramatic inequality. Capital revenue and labor revenue are not the same, meaning that there is a transfer. These people pay taxes in Germany, these people don't pay in healthcare services at home, and so on and so on. So there's a dramatic thing. Then we have to ask the question, is it possible to have common thinking in Europe concerning this? No. So we have at least one structural answer why there is no agreement between Germany and, let's say, East European countries concerning migration, because they are in a completely different structural position. We will come back to this. Then we have to go to the next point, the crisis of what? And you said, and I liked it a lot, that this European crisis of refugees is problematic, because I think the crisis is with European identity. And this is not the crisis of the refugees, because we could see Europe could be able to handle this. It's not impossible to handle this. And then I would like to come to this conflict, to the political discourses, as the next level. Here comes something post-colonial, right? Let me explain very simply, because some of you haven't studied post-colonial thing. One of the key things in terms of I'm sorry, I'm moving.
That's okay.
Sorry. That's the problem with the refugees, they're also moving, right? This is a major mistake, we shouldn't have this, right? And actually this is, the point is the following, that Europe, as a previous colonizer, was able to maintain a cognitive system in which Europe was untouchable. During the colonial period, migrants could not really go to Europe, right? It was more or less forbidden for them. Okay, and then here I just wanted to say certain things, that this is what post-colonial literature called metropolitan gaze, which is burning. I give you one example. I hope you understand it and it's not too hasty. So during the colonial period, a choir in South Africa was traveling to England, making a show. Of course, they had to dress up Bantu. Of course, they were not Bantu, but they had to dress up for the Europeans because this is what they liked, right? That was their imagination, right? And then the head of the choir was making a diary at that time. And I read it. He arrived to London and he said, all in all, I can say the things which I can see in this town are big and numerous. If I were to try to explain them, I would go mad and the diary is over. So he became blind, seeing the metropolitan city of London. Now in this cognitive structure, colonial subjects are not supposed to do anything autonomously. They should be somehow passive. I show it to you. I took it up from a blog. The blog says the following: these refugees, if they are refugees, they should come in another way. They should behave. They should follow the rules. But the thing is that they are not doing this. Also, this kind of an Orientalism, everyday Orientalism, is this, which was very common during the last year. Hey, those people fleeing war in Syria aren't poor at all. So, in case you are coming from a war zone, you have to be poor, right? Why not? I mean, richer people cannot be born, right? Okay, so this is really crazy what's going on. For example, look at that, they all have smartphones. Even on public media, once I was asked about this, and how do they have smartphones? And then I told, well, you see, they buy them and use them. That's, the answer to your question, right? But this whole thing has to be in mind. How is that possible that Europeans are having this imagination that these people should be so poor? Look at the GDP figures. Syria was not doing badly till 2010. Syria was not a super poor country. Nonetheless, these people are unaware of this, right? Regardless of the things that they have Syrian migrants, dentists, right? Doctors, all kinds of people. Nonetheless, they say, oh, how is that possible, right? So the whole story is really disturbing, and I will come back just a second. I want to cut it short a little bit. Now, this is annoying Europeans. During that night which I talked about, some of the refugees decided to go on foot. And actually they started a march on the Hungarian highway. And once again, I don't want to be too, popularistic, but look at the picture. These people are not behaving as the Europeans want to see them. They have agency, and they show it. They have agency regardless of the thing that in the public discourses they don't talk. I've been living in my country, and in not a single TV program I could see that a refugee could talk more than 30 seconds. So they don't have voice. Nonetheless, these voiceless people all of a sudden start marching. To be honest, I would love to put out this photo to my office. It's beautiful. You see, this is about freedom. These people are going. I mean, this woman in front of it is about liberty, right? This woman is not showing fear. Nothing is going on. They say, we do it. So these refugees took an agency. This is one of the big problems for Europe. How is that possible that these people are not blinded by Europe? How they do not accept that they stop at the first place and they behave as it is told to them? Then another hysteria is also going on. Some people are leaving because they want to become refugees. They're coming back. That's, transnational migration. Right? I really would like to point out one more thing concerning the crisis of the European identity. Because Europe is having not only a problem of non-Europe hierarchy, but they have a problem of inside Europe. These bloody East Europeans are also making their voice. I show it to you, please read it. I try to read it slowly because there are hard workers who have to read these things and translate it. Okay, in January, you know the story of Brexit, right? One of the big things from the United Kingdom is that they are fed up with the bloody immigrants, mainly from Eastern Europe. And they are fed up with the system that East Europeans, as opposed, let's say, to Georgian migrants, they receive benefits because they are citizens of the European Union. And Mr. Cameron I think he's probably reading Karl Marx thoroughly, so he's saying that, well, we need only the abstract labor. The attachments should not come really, right? So all these social things should not come. Let's get rid of them. So Mr. Cameron comes to Eastern Europe and tells them, please forget that you get family allowance, right? Sorry. Forget about unemployment benefit. No, just work. That's okay. We have nothing against that, but don't drain our resources, right? Okay. Now here comes an East European voice, and this is the Hungarian Prime Minister. And look at how inventive he is. He's answering Mr. Cameron in the following way. This is a quote from The Guardian. So, David Cameron was told by his Hungarian counterpart, Viktor Orbán, not to treat Hungarians in the UK as migrants. So this was really the committing suicide, because all the time Viktor Orbán was shouting loud, migrants, they are parasites, migrants are terrorists, and so on. And then comes somebody tells that, what about the Hungarian migrants? He said, oh no, they are not migrants. And then this is what he's saying, that for us it is very important that we are not considered as migrants. Words matter here. This is, my Prime Minister is like a bad Protestant speaker. This is how he talks. Really, very funny. Words matter here. We would like to make it quite clear that we are not migrants into the UK. But we are the citizens of a state that belongs to the European Union, who can take jobs anywhere freely within the European Union. We do not want to go to the UK and take something from them. We do not want to be parasites. We want to work there, and I think that Hungarians are working well. They should get respect. Dignity. Dignity comes out. They should get respect, and they should not suffer discrimination from the mouth of Viktor Orbán. But we have to read this carefully, because this is a clue what he is saying. He is saying we hate the refugees because European space is for East European workers, not for these niggers. And that's a clue. It's a competitive thing in hierarchy. Plus, very importantly, they say, even more, we have the right to change European politics in this. So it's a revolt against West Europeans because they need migrants, they use migrants, they work with them, but we East Europeans, we want it only for ourselves, not for the outsiders, and we have the right to intervene. This is a clue in the hysteria, and if somebody misses this point, then this is a very important point. And now I'm coming to a conclusion. I know it has been a bit complicated, but the problem is that in case we want to have a decent picture, we have to have a complex analysis. This is what politicians hate. This is why we should fight them all the time, that public is to be informed in a complex manner. People are not stupid. But what is happening here is something extraordinary. Namely, we see the emergence of a new authoritarianism in Europe also. Most people thought it was for Putin's Russia. But they didn't understand that. Then they thought it was only about Turkey. But they didn't understand that as well. They thought only Hungary. But we can see that this new authoritarianism is gaining ground. Poland. People are voting in governments which are openly authoritarian in all spheres.
Have you heard the Polish government on abortion? That was really mind-boggling, that was just one. They immediately changed the constitutional court, started completely changing the political system. Then I mentioned to you Austria. Austria is also moving in that direction. And then the whole thing is really burning. And that, I say, is very important, and this is why I will use, I will explain immediately. We are seeing, in my impression, semi-fascist, passive revolution going on in Europe. Europe is changing its face completely because Europe is having very serious structural problems. Okay. What is the key thing what most European politicians would like to maintain? In economic competitiveness, in terms of economic prospects, in terms of losing capital toward non-European territories, Europe, and most importantly, European lower classes are in a very difficult position. The new governments are dramatically strained because up till now they have been maintaining a very good social system, and now they have to get rid of this and they have to push it through the throat of those people. This is why you're having all kinds of workers' movements against austerity. You know, this political game is going on. We had just in Belgium, in France, and all these things are really becoming very often. And then here comes a very important thing. Europe is trying to defend privileges they are losing. And this is why they are mobilized. Because they are afraid of the refugees. But they are afraid of anything what this large-scale capital is going to do them. So they would like to get a new control over this to secure positions. It's a defensive thing. The next thing, the new elites, Viktor Orban included, but all the other ones, in France, in the Netherlands, in Germany, they understood, they understand this extreme volatile position of some of the previous working classes and lower middle classes, which are having a lot of troubles. Insecurity. I like the term abandoned working classes, because the state is withdrawing and also capital has left them. So Europe, in the long run, Europe lost manufacturing jobs at a dramatic rate. This is a dramatic challenge. And then how to compensate for this? This is the debate about. Some people say refugees are helpful. German capital says, use them, use them, use them, and they shout. While at the same time, there's a passive revolution against this, meaning that they want to have something else. Plus, very importantly, some of the elite groups which have been frustrated because of the previous scenario, most important in Eastern Europe, they want to reallocate resources. And this is this new oligarchs. I know I'm in Georgia, I also know this country a little bit. But there's something very important here in Eastern Europe. This is why it's super acute there. Because in the beginning, after the change of the regime, resources were privatized, were given. But this new elite which is coming, they say, for us as well. And then here comes a very important point. They have to retake resources, because it's not free. So it means a dramatic conflict. So it's going to be violent. This is why they need this new authoritarian state. That was what Putin did. This is exactly the thing he wanted. He was telling, I'm going to retain the control I kick out half of the oligarchs, and only those ones are going to be fed who are loyal to me. But you have to understand this in this dramatic fight. Here I just put workers. And then here I finish in a kind of a theoretical thing, which I could check yesterday in Rustam as well. Antonio Gramsci. During the whole year, this guy was coming back to my mind again and again and again. Why? First of all, because he was the one who talked about hegemony. Right? He was the first to explain why people don't revolt. He was the guy who introduced the concept subaltern. And these are very important. With each Gramsci. Gramsci is to be read. But then something else was also. What about this passive revolution he used? And when I looked at it, I found some extremely relevant points. And I quote, passive revolution is a revolution without a revolution. More importantly, there is this revolution restoration. That is to say, this is creating a new hegemony within the system, not changing the system. Okay? Second, he's asking, think about this question of him. This is what he wrote in the 1930s, poor guy in prison. Is not fascism precisely the form of passive revolution proper to the 20th century as liberalism in the 19th century? That is to say, shouldn't we think we have been living in a liberal era? Isn't this liberal hegemony over? Aren't we seeing a semi-fascist hegemony emerging? Aren't we seeing, and this is why we can't laugh, because they are the winners. They are coming up. Next question from Antonio Gramsci. Can the concept of passive revolution, in the sense attributed by Vincenzo Giuoco to the first period of the Italian Risorgimento, be related to the concept of war of positions? That is to say, defending positions. Isn't it the same what we are seeing? That this is about the war and the defense and the fight over positions? In contrast to the war of maneuver, which introduces another term. French Revolution was over the maneuver. Afterwards, that was a war of position. Aren't we seeing this? Aren't we seeing capitalist blocks fighting with each other, trying to defend positions in the markets? Aren't we seeing this in terms of war? Wasn't that the case during the recent crisis? And here comes my warning. And I am the first and the happy. I pay everybody beer, wine, cha-cha, anything if I am proven wrong. I promise I come back and I pay happily if I am wrong. And you don't need to pay to me, right? That's not an issue. But I think the 21st century, at least how it is emerging, is going to be completely different. And I just would like to point some points. First thing, there is a demographic decline going on. There's a dramatic fight over quality labor migrants. This conflict between abandoned working classes, idle classes, some people talk about precarious classes, and the migrants is going to be a key conflict. Whatever we think, it's not going to disappear. This is a real social fight. This is really everybody's at each other's throat. wars. My feeling that this war is not over, which we are seeing, might become actually more intense. The blocks are becoming too clear. And then there's a the next one is also super important. There is this new thing going with TTIP. I don't want to go into this. I have seen recent statistics. The role of live labor is declining dramatically throughout the world. Capital doesn't need that amount of live labor to go ahead. There's economic growth without the growth of employment. And that is something really which is going to make this fight even stronger. Europeans are not in a very good position, and because they are losing privileges. It seems that this globalization is not working out for them. Because this bloody non-Europeans, they can also do economy, turns out to be. Which means that actually the market is killing Europe. And that's a major challenge to Europe. And I'm putting all these things together. This is why I have this warning that a new authoritarian form is coming as a new political form globally. And I hope I'm going to be proven wrong, but I hope that sometime later we can discuss it. But at least something is very important. The refugee crisis has been a cataclysm. The refugee crisis got something to the surface politically, sharply, and it has already changed Europe, and this is the Europe what Georgia is trying to approach. The only thing I wanted to say, please think quickly what's going on. Thank you.
So I'm going to use the privilege of the moderator and ask the first question, and then we'll open it to the floor. I think you showed admirably that one of the issues that's at the center of all of this is the question of who gets to be the other. If we refer back to one of the first pictures that you showed, welcome to Hungary, we're all in England, working in England. We've gone to work in London. This is exactly the type of message that speaks to the shifting line of Orientalism, right? Which other thinkers have addressed before. So, say, Europe orientalizes Russia, but then within Europe there are its own lines of orientalization. So Western Europe orientalizes Eastern Europe. Eastern Europe itself divides into Eastern Europe and Western Eastern Europe. Then lines people who orientalize each other, and then out all the way to the west we have England, right? Great Britain then orientalizes sort of everyone to its left, right? You're all coming this way. And this is this sort of pernicious logic that operates behind a lot of this. But the thing that I want to address is that there is a notion of Europe as a citadel of liberty, as a citadel of sort of progressive ideas, which needs defending from these sort of invading hordes. And even people like, I know these are very populist examples. Let's take, say, Slavoj Žižek and Bill Maher as two sort of supposedly progressive thinkers, right? Žižek himself has highlighted this notion of shifting Orientalism, but then there is a certain line of thinking within the European left, or the supposed left, I don't know how you want to evaluate it, that says we have been cowards as European leftists for being afraid of asserting certain fundamental European values which are under attack and which need defending. I'm being the devil's advocate. I think they're wrong, but I'd like to solicit your response to this, right? So, yes, there's something fundamentally progressive about Europe, which is under attack, and the leftists who have become so busy, say, identifying with the incoming crowds, as you so beautifully did in the opening of your lecture, have forgotten that Europe needs defense, right? And that we are compromising European ideals by not juxtaposing them against the culture of the incoming people, which itself is based on fascist civilizations, which is wrong. But I would like to hear your response to this supposed critique from the left.
Of course, the floor is absolutely open. So, to be honest, I really would like to have a discussion over this, because I think the situation here is something to reflect upon. So I really would like to do that. And I stand up, because then you don't see me. I try to be short, and I try to be provocative in two ways. I've learned something. In case you study social change, which is a key subject area of sociology, you have to understand really structural changes, because these structural changes are leading to massive change. And then I think we all have the misconception that intellectuals and elite groups are the ones which all of a sudden do things, they abandon, they start something new. This is wrong. Society is following, various challenges. There are dramatic changes, and the problem is that generally we are not paying attention to that, right? Especially we are not paying attention to this globally speaking, because global structural analysis is not a habit. I think one of the big things what we intellectuals should really change, to push everybody into that direction, to analyze quickly in order to understand what's going on. So this is one. So whatever I think, also my leftist friends are saying, let's do something, we should really fight, and say, fine, we fight, no problem, that's true. Nonetheless, don't expect that things are going to change just because you do something, right? That's something very important. And it's not really because I am a pessimist or passive, or not at all. The same thing is about with these European values, so kind of a quote-unquote European values like liberty, tolerance, international refugee, legal regime, and so on and so on. Of course you need to defend it, right? And then you have to say something about this. But once again, that a couple of people, as opposed to the masses, say something, it's not going to change things. Politicians are not speaking out of conviction, they are speaking out of calculating all these things, right? That was the most frightening thing. In Orban and many of these politicians, they are they use really good media analysis. And I know that this is what they're doing. They have a debate. In the afternoon, 10 professionals work on the social media because they come. Should we do this or that? And in the afternoon, you have to do the media analysis. So it's not that they're paying attention to things and they have their own conviction. That's an old school. It's gone. The third thing is I am super critical with this Europe. Because Europe means a lot of things. Of course I understand that people identify really positive things. But Europe has been the worst during the 20th century. It produced Nazi political violence, Nazi-led war, communist political violence, and not forget it, dramatic colonial violence. What is to be proud of? I always quote Emis Ezersi, Europe is morally and spiritually indefensible. What do I see now? Europe is indefensible just morally and spiritually. That's what I see. So I'm much more cautious. I think I'm very happy to be in any European which is able really to assure that there is, stability, dignity of the various others as well. Okay? I am the first to come. But at the moment, I see a lot of blah blah going on with regard to Europe. The last thing, I absolutely agree, this otherness is hierarchical, but these hierarchies are changing because the economy is changing. The West is not anymore privileged. Sorry. How are you going to maintain this superior identity? That's a question, it's changing. But the fight is going on. I absolutely agree, that was a very relevant comment. What you mean? So.
Okay. You talked a lot about the ongoing dramatic correlation between the declining share in the total capital of the declining share of the labor in capital, because the capital follows the line of automatization and technological changes and so on and so on. And you somehow alluded that this dramatic change also has its consequences on the refugee crisis, because the problem of employment and the integration within the labor market becomes crucial, and Europe cannot fundamentally deal with this problem. Could you elaborate a little bit on this strange coupling of employment problem and the refugee crisis, and what consequences may it have on the declining Northern Europe welfare states, which are basically one of the most wanted countries to go to for the refugees?
Yep. I think what you are asking is one of the key questions. In your question, I can see at least 3 PhD topics to be studied seriously. The first question would be how this fight over social policy resources are related to migration as such. This is one topic which needs to be studied. We can see that discursively this is absolutely happening. They say that, and think it over sociologically. In case you want to maintain privileges for the non-migrants, then you really have to set up such categories that you are able to exclude them, right? That's the most important check. What categories are going to be like this? You have to stay there for how long to get benefits or not. So these are really sharp issues over categories in society. Second, you're absolutely right that, but think it paradoxically, right? I'm always surprised that when we think about society, we are not paradoxical enough. Because you might think that in case the value of labor is declining, overall in Europe it was 62 or 63% 20 years ago. Now it is 53%. In Africa, this is around 44% of the GDP. And so on. So you can see, you may think that's not bad news, because then migrants are not so much needed. But on the contrary, migrants are very much needed. Because what is needed in this bloody competition is the super worker who's able to use the technology. So they're interested in how informatics is taught in Tbilisi. Because they want that. In Romania they do the same. Dramatic fight is going on for either mobile labor in the sense of bodies or mobile online labor, which is a new form of this global capitalism, right? We call it virtual migration. Which means that you're not moving, your body is not needed. This is very good. From a capitalist point of view, this is fantastic, right? Hey, come on. You're not coming, you're not destroying all these things around us. You just send your labor. Think of a labor protest, by the way, online, right? You kick the windscreen. Well, what do? How you protest? You can be kicked out like this. So this means that the fight is going to be around this mobile labor, which is going to be the best possible at the cheapest possible price. This is not going to be the cheapest. This is not going to be anything good for the poor, because the poor are out. They don't have skills, they don't have anything. We East Europeans are good targets in this respect. Or Syrians, this is the same thing. So when actually companies really come out openly, we have to take it seriously. They are looking for such people. They want disciplined, hardworking, well-educated people, used not on the level of their education, so that they're not going to talk about Dostoevsky, but what they need to do is to do the work very hard. And then it came out as a conflict, and then even in the refugee crisis it came out very clearly, because the Hungarian right wing and the East European right wing was shouting, we are not accepting these refugees for the sake of German capital. This is what they said. I give you another example. I'm sitting in Vienna at a migration conference. And then we are sitting there, scholars, and there is the head of the industrial chamber. We are talking about whether migrants are needed. And then this guy, this head of the industrial chamber, just told the following. We need them. We need quite a lot. Thank you very much. This is what he wanted to say. This is something very important, because we have to see this. Now when it comes to PhD, of course, what happens to these people? Are they really able to get integrated in the labor market? How society is going to separate the successful and the unsuccessful? These are really empirical, burning questions we have to ask ourselves, right? The only thing I'm saying is that regardless of the saying that it is going down, it doesn't mean that migrant labor is less needed. On the contrary. Migrant labor is really the fight for very high quality labor. Flexible, mobile labor. That's the 21st century. 20th century is like Charlie Chaplin, you know, doing all the assembly lines. This is gone. This is not what they need, right? Of course there are assembly lines, but the role is going down. Okay, that's all.
How is Janet?
No other questions?